Hey guys, come follow me time again. You know, I'm at the beach and I thought I'd bring you with me. And I don't know if you can see it because the sun's right there, but better? I don't know. Can't tell. The sun's around the lens. And I think, every time I think, I'll take them outside, and then I remember how hard filming outside actually is and why I stopped doing it in the first place. But nonetheless, let's crack on because we're here. Let's do it. So, Revelation 6 through 14, I think it is. Yeah, 6 through 14. 15 through 22, which is the rest of it, comes actually the week after Christmas. And I don't do a Christmas lesson because you don't need one. You've got enough resources out there and enough to do. So Christmas is covered by 1,000 million other people. This is come follow me really, but some people like this one. Good, but you don't need a Christmas one. So I might pop on and give you some things I've been thinking about, but not necessarily this format. Okay. Alrighty, so if you're watching on YouTube, the Christmas doesn't exist on YouTube for my, it exists, you know what I'm saying, but there won't be any Christmas videos. Alright, having said that, Revelation 6. So this leads right off from where we looked at last week. It sort of just flows really well, because it's exactly the same vision. I don't know where they put the break here, but anyway, that Christ opens the seals. This is where he actually does it. So we saw him last week saying he is the one, and that the lamb came forward, and John was going, it's the lamb, I am expecting something bigger, but actually the lamb is the one that does it. So this is where he actually opens the seals, and you can see some very interesting symbolism here. Read it through and have a look. I'll cover a few little things as we go through, and if you want further notes, just message me, or I don't mind, but I don't try and get too heavy here, just to give you some guidelines. This is something you really need to read yourself. The one verse I was going to point out, which I can't remember, verse 17. The last one in the chapter, it says, "For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand?" Now the answer's in chapter 7, which we're going to do next, but before we get there, it's those who allow God and embrace covenant Israel and his promises, and the promises there. And stand is actually the opposite of at ease. So it's like you can't do this easily. None of this is going to be easy, or and I completely debunked the whole, I never said it'd be easy, but I said it'd be worth it. Christ never said that. He said, this isn't going to be easy, but I'm with you. That's what he said. So those are the ones that are going to be able to stand, are the ones that embrace that. Now I've seen that recently with a lot of friends just not standing so well, and they're ones that aren't Christian and they don't embrace their faith, or if they are Christian, they're not embracing it, and it really does show, which is sad. And I've been able to talk them through some rough times. That's why I've come to have my Jesus in the Mountains moment and have that prayer and meditation sort of couple of days, so that I'm able to go back in and continue to help people in that manner. But it's something that, who will be able to stand this great day of just ugliness and awfulness? It's those that have that relationship with Christ. Now there's some other good, if you want to look at some other scriptures that go with us, you've got Doctrine and Covenants 45:70 and Amos 6:1. Really good examples of that. But what else is in this chapter? And I've got 1,000 notes all over here, and I could talk for this for hours, and that's why I'm going to try and not, because it's something that you should study yourself and figure out yourself. I'll probably type some more notes in, but again, if you want more, just ask. But the 7 seals here, and in this one he opens 6, so the 7th seal, which is our time, actually goes on for chapters, which is great because that's what we want to know, right? That's where we want to study. History is great, but we're living now, so what does it apply for us now? So it covers the chapters, and you see, to begin with, 4 horsemen, but anyway, so each seal is a different time period. We know these also as dispensations, so they're kind of marked at about 1,000 years, but it's a very rough measurement of time, as in we don't actually know how long Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden. Allowing dinosaurs to actually be millions of years old, we don't know that time period or how that worked. Like they say in the beginning of Genesis, it says a day, but a day is just meaning a time period. So these also just mean a time period. Some of them are actually very close to 1,000 years, and some are just really not. So actually, don't worry about that too much. Just think of it as this time period, and they had to call it something. So this time period, and Here it's a seal. Often in church it's talked about as a dispensation, and they're also called 1,000-year periods. Doesn't actually mean 1,000 years though, that is a symbolic thing. It's cool. So the horsemen. So there's 4 of them, and they're often termed as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and people are like, oh, they're going to come again and they're going to do all their things. Well, big surprise people, they already did that. So the first one is white horse, and that's representative of the time of Adam and Eve and Enoch. It's talking about victory and like the start of this earth journey. And then there's a red horse, was just sin and death and violence. Actually, that's talking about Noah and the flood. So that's already happened too. And then there's a third horse, which is black, and that's symbolic of grief and sorrow and mourning. And that fits really well with Joseph of Egypt and the whole time of famine and hardship, being that Egypt was the main place on the planet at that time. So if they were suffering, everyone was suffering. Much like now, if say England or the United Kingdom is suffering and America's suffering, pretty much everyone else in the world suffers to a degree because they are the biggest superpowers. So while the rest of us might get on with life and not be as affected, we're still affected by it. And then you've got the pale green horse, which is down what just says pale, but that would indicate, it's one of the symbolisms that they use, probably green. It's not mentioned green, but anything pale, like not a full color, would indicate like impending death. And that's given to Babylon, Greece and Rome, which is in around that the 4th seal of that 1000 BC to right on where Christ was born, ish period, again loosely defined. Babylon, Greece and Rome were the main superpowers, and they were just fighting it out and causing everybody grief and constantly invading, overcoming, ruling, wiping out generations of people to try and ethnic cleanse. There was all sorts of ugliness going on. So that's talking about that time period. So there's a whole lot of things in there to unpack. So again, I recommend you doing your own study. I'm just pointing out some things to maybe look at and not be too terrified of. When Christ comes again, there are not going to be 4 horsemen that come and do stuff. That's not how it is. There's a symbolic of things that have already happened. So is it important to know, though, the question I thought of this is, and this is the Come Follow Me manual too, talking about this, is it actually important to know this book with the 7 seals symbolic meaning? Is it actually important to know that? Like, break it down, like, to all its little things? Not really, because we don't actually need to know all the things. It's good to have an understanding, a basic understanding of what this might be, because like I know what I believe it to be. You might believe it to be something else, but there's some thought there. There's a lot of thought as to what it could be. There are many thoughts. Actually, if you Google it, it's just this flood of information, and it's too much for the average person, let alone anyone that's not even at that reading level. It's just like, oh my freaking gosh. And it's like, you know what, you don't actually need all of that. But what we can know is that it's only able to be opened by Christ, so that's really important. And then it indicates that if it's only opened by Christ, it's a plan that he controls. Now, isn't that awesome? So my next question then would be, why do you think it's important to know Jesus is the only one to open each seal? Because it's all under his control. And you could say, well, then why does he let all these things happen? Well, we'll get to that in chapters 8 through 11. That'll be insight number 3. It's not actually an evil, ugly thing. So why do you think that is? That, what do you think this book is? Because I believe it to be kind of like the history or timeline of the earth. John gets to see all of it, not in great detail, but generalization and trying to describe it. And the fact that Jesus is the only one to open each seal. He's in control. He's got this. It's not a chaotic plan. It's not a big mess of an apocalypse that we know it to be. Remember, apocalypse just means uncovering. So let's lose the fear of it and know that Christ has got us and he's in control and it's okay. And isn't that comforting to know? 100%. Makes a world of difference. Alright. That's insight number 1. A little bit about the 7 seals in chapter 6. We're going to go over and look at the answer as to who can stand, and that's in chapter 7. I'll see you there.